again, my name is DJ Shursing, and I'm a senior here at East. I'm a member of our Leadership Academy here at school. And could everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of the Flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now please join me in welcoming students from West Seneca East Senior and Winchester Elementary as they sing the Star-Spangled Banner. Thank you to Mr. Ferrugia and Ms. Panfil and the music students for an amazing rendition of our national anthem. Our next speaker is a highly regarded high school basketball coach from the Rochester, New York area. Coach Johnson has developed the winning high school basketball teams for 28 years, taking 3 losing varsity programs and turning them into winners in short periods of time. Of his 383 career victories, one in particular will surely never be duplicated. On February 15, 2006, Coach Johnson made the kind-hearted gesture inserting his autistic manager, Jason McEllen, now known to the world as J-Mac, into Greece Athena's high school final basketball game. With the Trojans winning 79-43, J-Mac scored 20 points in just over 4 minutes, including 6 three-point baskets, to become an instant national celebrity. Coach Johnson was named Coach of the Year in 2006 by several Rochester area organizations and was also presented with a National Sportsmanship Award. These honors brought to light an impressive body of work over the past 2 decades. His career record is now 383 and 218, with divisional titles in 1996, 2002, 2003, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2013, and again in 2014. For 2014, he was named All-Greater Rochester Coach of the Year and has had winning seasons in 20 of the past 21 years, finishing 500 the other year. Coach Johnson, who is a graduate of both SUNY Cortland and SUNY Brockport, lives in Greece with his wife of 31 years, Pat, and their son Tyler, who is 23. He is a physical education teacher at Greece Athena and has served 18 seasons as the Trojans high school varsity coach. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Coach Johnson.
Thank you. How many here have a dream? Easy question to answer, right? How many have a really big dream that they think maybe could never come true? How many think all of us can be leaders and all our students can be leaders? Great, we're on the same page. And I want to talk very briefly before I get into my talk here about the Leader in Me program. I think it's an awesome program. I'm a big fan of the Franklin Covey organization. I had a chance a couple years ago to visit Kathy Brockman's school at Winchester and their Leader in Me program. I've done some things in my own teaching, and I'd highly recommend it. Today, though, I want to inspire you to think bigger and to help you make your dreams come true and help others make their dreams come true. And to do that, I'm going to share a story that I was very blessed to be part of. And I'm also going to give you 6 tangible keys that you can take with you to help you and help others make their dreams come true. To do that, I had a young man named Jason McElwain. He has autism. How many people here know someone that has autism? It's become very prevalent. In fact, the latest research I've seen is 1 out of every 64 children born in the United States will be on the autism spectrum. Pretty powerful. Well, Jason had autism, but that didn't deter him from dreaming big. And his big dream was he wanted to get an opportunity to play in a varsity basketball game. And on February 15th, 2006, that dream came true. If you're not familiar with the story or you need a little refresher, I'm going to share with you a 5-minute DVD on what happened on that magical night.
What we all want in life is a shot. But what we do with it, that's the story we all want to tell.
You know, I've coached for 25 years, and I've never experienced that, the emotional high of what happened.
What happened for Jason McElwain, or J-Mac as his friends call him, is about more than a shot. Diagnosed with autism at 2 years old, now identified as highly functioning, he's never considered himself different or separate, especially when it comes to sports.
Sports has always been, how could I say, his equalizer. He's just like any of the other kids out there.
It's not really a big deal at all. I'm just normal like other people. It's the way I am.
At 5'6", J-Mac didn't make the junior varsity basketball team at his high school, Greece Athena, near Rochester, New York. Instead, he became team manager, a role he now has for the varsity as a senior. In the last 3 years, in his white shirt and black tie, he's missed only 1 game.
Go on practice, I set up the clock and get the water in games and be enthusiastic.
As this season was wrapping up, Coach Johnson approached Jason with an idea about the Trojans' final home game of the season.
I said, I'm really going to look to try to get you in the game, but remember, I can't promise you that. And he was, okay, Coach.
February 15th, Greece Athena against Spencerport, senior night. With word out that Jason might play, the student section printed signs of J-Mac's face, just in case. And with 4:19 left in the game, with the Trojans up by 20, Coach called down to the end of the bench for number 52.
I just kind of turned and pointed at him, and he almost ran right on the court. He was so excited.
Hey, Jay, you got to check in. So he hits the buzzer, and he doesn't go anywhere. It's like, now you go on the court. He was so caught up in the moment.
He came into the game, they all stood up and they put the signs, the pictures of him up, and I got really emotional. And I sat down and started to cry.
With 3:46 left, Jason got the ball.
When he missed that first 3, I was like, oh, and then it airball, and I was like, man, I really just want to see him score 1 time.
I put my head in my hands, like, dear God, please, just get him a basket.
Then, with 3:12 left, another chance.
That third trip down the court, magic.
As soon as I started hitting my first shot, I just kept shooting, and I was just hot as a pistol.
Shot after shot after shot kept going in.
The basket was like this big, huge bucket, and I was shooting them like they were free throws. It was just a big, huge bucket that's like huge.
And I was like, oh my God, is this really happening? He has more points than me, so he's got bragging rights over me.
He was unstoppable for that moment in time. He was unstoppable.
He comes down the court right at the end with like 3 seconds left, and he hits this one that's, probably like an NBA three. As soon as the gun ended, they stormed the court, I couldn't, I just couldn't dream anything like that.
It felt like we won a championship. Everyone was just so happy for me.
In that 4 minutes, 19 seconds, Jason was 7 for 13, 6 of 10 from three-point range, 20 points in all. In his first and only varsity basketball game, J-Mac was the high scorer.
Truly the most incredible moment I've ever had in coaching. I was so touched, and it was just so special to me that a young man, his dream came true, and that I could help that. It was awesome.
What we all want in life is a shot. J-Mac took his, and now it's a story we can all tell.
I know as educators, we're always taught to plan. And of course, on our game plan that night was to get Jason with just over 4 minutes to go and help him get 20 points. Well, maybe it wasn't quite like that. Today, what I'd like to do is inspire you to think bigger. And I'm going to share some things about Jason, give you a little bit of background, and take you back about a decade. Jason came into our basketball program as a sophomore in high school. And he tried out for the JV team. I'm the varsity coach. And after a couple days of tryouts, my JV coach came to me and said, "Coach, Jason's not a very good player. In fact, he's small, he's slow, and he's not very skilled. But boy, he's got something we need in our program." I said, "What's that?" He says, "He's got a huge heart, and I think we should give him a chance." I said, "Great. What have you got in mind?" He says, "Well, I'm going to offer him the team manager's job, but I'm going to let him practice with the team every day." And that's what he did. And I must admit, I did not know much about autism at that point. And early in the season, there were some real trials and tribulations as Jason got used to his new teammates, and his new teammates got used to Jason. But as the season progressed, I really saw this awesome bond now occurring with the team and Jason. Meanwhile, the varsity coach, me, was having a very difficult time pronouncing Jason's last name. In fact, if butchering his last name was a misdemeanor, I would have been on death row. I could not pronounce his last name. One day I'm walking by the JV practice and I get an aha moment. I know players like nicknames. So I walked in the gym and I said, "Jason, come here." Now Jason was about 5'6", 100 pounds at that point, but he had this really deep voice. And he comes over and says, "Yeah, coach, what can I do for you?" I said, "You know how Syracuse University has GMAC?" At that time, Syracuse had a player named Jerry McNamara that played on the national championship team that was named GMAC. He goes, "Yeah, I like GMAC." I said, "Well, great, because if Syracuse can have GMAC, Greece Athena is going to have JMAC." And he looked at me and said, "I like that." So as Dr. Covey would say, that was a win-win, because he liked the nickname and I didn't have to say McElwain. As the season was coming to a close, my JV coach, Coach Amoroso, came to me with another idea. He said, "Coach, I want to give Jason a chance to play in a game." For our last JV game, he got Jason in with about 2 minutes to go. And yes, you probably could have guessed it. The first time Jason touched the ball in the JV game, after watching that film, he shot a three. It did not go in, but he got a chance to go to the foul line because he got fouled on the shot. He goes to the foul line for 3 shots, and lo and behold, he makes all 3. The place erupts. Jason's not only got into the JV game, but he scored 3 points. After the season, Coach Amoroso and I got together and we said, "We got to do something special for Jason at the banquet." We decided to give him a plaque, and at the banquet, we read the plaque, and it said, "Jason J. Mac McElwain, Greece Athena's all-time greatest free throw shooter." After all, he was 3 for 3, 100%. You can't beat that. He was elated. But really what made Jason so unique to me, because I was starting to get to know him better, was not that he was autistic or learning disabled, but the fact that he had such passion and drive and he wanted to be such an important part of our program. Between his sophomore and junior year, he started to come to all our off-season workouts, and he was getting better. And his goal was to make the varsity. When he tried out as a junior, I brought him in after a couple days of tryouts. I said, Jason, unfortunately, you're not quite good enough to be on the team, but I want to offer you the varsity team manager's job. Well, he loved being around his classmates, so he quickly accepted that role. And he adopted a mantra that year. And what his mantra was about, at that point in my career, we had been pretty successful, but I had this big stumbling block. Have you ever had a stumbling block you didn't think you'd ever get through? For me, we kept losing in the sectional semifinals. Going into Jason's junior, we had lost 5 times in that semifinal game. Jason adopts this mantra: we're going to stay focused, and we're going to help coach win his first Section 5 championship. We have a really good season. We get to the sectional semifinals now for the 6th time, and we lose at the buzzer to our crosstown rival. We're devastated. But that's not going to stop J-Mac. He comes more bound and determined than ever to make the team as a senior. When he tries out his senior year, after a couple days of tryouts, I bring him in. I said, J-Mac, I got some good news and some bad news. He says, Coach, give me the bad news first. He said, well, unfortunately, you're still not quite good enough to make the team. And this time he was visibly disappointed. His head dropped down, and you could see he was upset. I said, but I do have some good news. And his head popped back up. He said, what do you got in mind, Coach? I said, well, for senior night, he goes, I'm a senior. I go, I know. For senior night, I'm going to give you a uniform and hopefully get you in the game. Well, he was pretty excited about that uniform idea. In fact, periodically, he would ask me about that uniform. And of course, I defined periodically as about every other day. Well, interesting, I have a book here, and I'd be glad to sign and sell them afterwards, called A Coach in America. I delve into all the life lessons. We had a really difficult start to Jason's senior season, to the point where I nearly resigned. But fortunately, I had great support from my wife and my coaching staff, and I held my ground through a very difficult time. But it really the turmoil affected our team greatly. And we had a good team, but we weren't together, and we were playing very poorly. And at Christmas, we were 4-3 going into a Christmas tournament at Fairport High School, the biggest high school in Rochester. And they had an outstanding team that year, but I thought we had a team that was pretty close to their caliber. Unfortunately, because we were in such turmoil, we won our opening round game by a couple points, but did not play well. And Fairport, in the closing game, won by 50 points. And the team they beat, we had beaten in overtime 2 weeks earlier. The next day, I brought my team into a shoot-around because we were off from school. And I sat them down and I told them something I've never told a team before that or since. I looked at them right in the eyes and I said, I don't want to go to the game tonight. And all their jaws hit the floor and they said, what do you mean, Coach, you don't want to go to the game tonight? I said, because we have so much strife amongst our team. Unless we decide that we're going to be a team and play together, we're going to lose by 100 points tonight. Well, fortunately, hopefully my words made a little bit of an impact, because that night we did not win the game, but we lost to Fairport in overtime. And it really showed our team that if we were together, how special we could be. From there, we won 8 out of our next 9 games going into senior night. Senior night was February 15th. On February 13th, I gave Jason his first uniform. It was number 52. It was way too big. He did not care. On February 15th, when he came to the game, there was a rumor that he had slept in it for 2 straight nights. I don't know if that was true, but the uniform was a little wrinkled. Well, senior night is really always a special night for me. I've been a head coach now for 29 years, and it's a great way to honor our seniors. We bring their parents and guardians out, and they embrace them and give their mother a flower, and it's a really nice night. But for this night, it was profoundly touching to see Jason, instead of his white shirt and black tie, now donning number 52. And to see him embrace his parents in uniform is a memory I'll always cherish. The game begins. As you saw in the video, we had a really nice student body following that year. They called themselves the Six Men, and they were really behind the team. And at the opening tap, they start chanting, "We want J-Mac, we want J-Mac." I guess just in case I forgot. Well, going to the game, I had three thoughts. Thought one was, we had really rallied in the season, and actually if we won the game, we had a chance to tie for the league championship. So certainly I wanted to give our team a chance to win. Number two, although I wanted to get Jason in the game, I felt it was important that we got all the other players that were regular team members on before I could put Jason in. And thirdly, I wanted to get Jason in with enough time so he could score a basket. I thought if he got a basket, that would be awesome. After 3 quarters, we had gotten everybody in except for J-Mac. With just over 4 minutes to go, I stood up and made a pretty good decision. I pointed and put him in the game. He nearly ran on the court. He was so fired up. My JV coach flags him down, gets him over to the scorer's table, and he doesn't know what to do. He is completely mesmerized. Meanwhile, I feel like I'm a pretty macho guy. I'm not going to cry in a basketball game, right? Wrong. What happened was one of our parents, who was kind of our unofficial photographer, got this idea to make all these placards of J-Mac's face and put them on paint sticks. And he gave them to this 6th man. But Jason and I were unaware of this. When Jason got into the game, they gave him a standing ovation and put all these placards of his face up. I was so overwhelmed with emotion, I sat down on the bench and tears were rolling down my face. I was profoundly touched. The game begins again. The first time we have the ball, Jason gets the ball in the right corner behind the 3-point line. He goes to shoot. Everybody stands with anticipation. It's a mob gym. It misses by like 10 feet. Now, I know you're not supposed to pray in the public schools. But I am praying, dear God, can we please help him just get one basket? The second possession you didn't see on the video, but actually this time we're on a fast break and Jason gets the ball very close from the basket, about 10 feet away. Now I got to add a little drama because it might be a movie someday. He shoots it. It hits the backboard. It hits the rim, and it falls off. The crowd groans. I'm thinking, all right, God's starting to listen. We're getting closer. Next possession, magic. He receives the ball behind the 3-point arc from the right wing. He lets it go, and it rattles home. It goes in. The place explodes. And I'm thinking to myself, God must be a basketball fan. Not only has Jason scored, he's got a 3-pointer. It can't get any better than this, right? Well, what happened the next 3 minutes is Jason turned into his boyhood idol, Kobe Bryant. And he starts making shot after shot after shot. And the place is going crazier and crazier. It's pure bedlam in the gym. And with a minute to go in the game, I get a tap on my shoulder. I look behind me. It's Jason's mother. She's bawling her eyes out. She embraces me and whispers in my ear, Coach, this is the best gift you could have ever given my son. It touched me so deeply. Of course, I cried harder. From there, this is how the game ends. And I'm going to need a little audience participation to help me through it. With 10 seconds to go, Spencer part our opponent that night. And I want to give kudos to their team and their coach. They were wonderful sports that night. They score. Our player takes the ball out of bounds, but instead of throwing it to his point guard, he throws it to Jason. So I'm going to demonstrate Jason. He didn't dribble too well. Dribbling down the court. If you can help me count down from 10, right? Ready? 10.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, you think that he's going to go all the way down and go in and make a layup, and that's how the game's going to end. No, this might be a movie. It's got to be better than that. He pulls up like 3 feet behind the arc. It's almost NBA 3. I think to myself, Jason, don't shoot from there. That's too far. He launches this rainbow. Swish. I look over, and our security person's holding the crowd back. They run right over the security person. Our players run on the court, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm living the movie Rudy. This is incredible, but this is really happening. And then the other thing I'll never forget, Jason's parents have an interesting dynamic. His dad is 6'6". His mom is 5 foot tall. And you see this little bitty lady bobbing and weaving through the crowd to get to her son, and she embraces Jason. Then our players put Jason up on their shoulders. He's got the game ball over his head. And at that point, I have no idea how many points he has. And our public address announcer comes on and says, the leading scorer for the Trojans tonight, J-Mac, with 20 points. Now, being in education, my math brain takes over and it says, if he plays the whole game, he scores 160. For those that are not basketball fans, that's pretty good. In fact, I get teased to this day. In fact, the TNT announcer, Charles Barkley, said on national TV that I can't believe they didn't fire the coach. He should have played all the time. That got in our local paper, and it still hangs over my desk because one of my thoughtful colleagues put it there to remind me. Well, after that, one of my duties is I have to call it into the local paper. And the thing I'm proud of is I didn't do that for publicity. I did that because a young man needed to have a chance. And I really didn't think it would go very far at all. In fact, our paper reported the next day, and I had gotten home that night, and I couldn't sleep a wink. I'm thinking, Jason's going to get a headline in the paper the next day. But he didn't. We did get a headline, but it says, Trojans, our nickname, tied for league title. And it mentioned a little bit about Jason in the article. So I really didn't think anything would happen. I get to school the next day. Now, I'm retired, so it doesn't matter anymore, but I used to say this is our secret because I didn't do much teaching that day. We watched that game film over and over and over again. And I don't think there were many people in classes because everyone was down in the gym. And kids are coming to me and say, Coach, this is going to get on ESPN. I said, ESPN? It didn't even get a headline in the DNC. Well, as usual, the students were right, and I was wrong. What happened was Jason's speech pathologist was at the game, and it was the first game he had ever attended, and he was so touched by what he saw that he called one of our local TV stations, Channel 8, to come and borrow the tape from me. And they did. They showed it that night, and it got such a nice response that the next day we had 3 local TV stations come in. And I remember one of the reporters saying, Jason, can you explain what happened? He says, yeah, it was just hot as a pistol. That night, we were going into our February break. Our regular season had ended, but we were going into our postseason. So the students have off from school, and I get a call that night from one of our sports guys saying, Jim, this story is unbelievable. Would you mind if I send it out nationally? I said, no, if it could make an impact on the country, I think that'd be wonderful. He sends it out nationally. Very quiet weekend. Monday morning, I'm getting ready for practice. And just before I leave, the phone rings. And it's CBS Evening News. By the way, doesn't normally call the house. I said, Coach, we've heard about the game. We want to come in and do a story about it. I said, sure, when would you like to come in? Oh, we're coming in tonight. Great. They showed the story on Thursday night. And we heard later from the late Ed Bradley. It was the first time in 25 years that CBS Evening News ever showed the same story 2 consecutive nights. That's what kind of response we got. On Friday of that February break week, it was a typical practice at Athena. Before practice, we were interviewed by Good Morning America, CNN, and ESPN. Then after practice, ESPN stayed for like 5 hours to do that little documentary that I showed. Now, my wife and I, we have a great relationship. We've been married for over 30 years. But she's very much a stickler on time. And I told her I'd be home from practice at 2. Well, I got home at 5. When I walked in the house, I nearly busted the door down. I said, honey, we're going to be on ESPN. She goes, ESPN, where have you been? You told me you'd be home at 2. Do you realize how many people called here for you today? And she had this big long list. She crumpled up the piece of paper, threw it at me, and departed from the house. She was under a little media scrutiny. But I will admit, the next week when Oprah's show called the house, she did pick the phone up. Saturday is our first game. We had gotten a bye in the first round, and fortunately we win quite easily, and we had a pretty typical post-game interview, People magazine. After the game, I said to my athletic director, because now we're going back to school. His name was Randy. I said, Randy, just in case we have some media attention, do you mind if I have a sub on Monday? We'll give you an idea how much media attention when we got back to school. I had a sub for 8 consecutive school days. It was crazy. Movie directors are calling, all kinds of radio and TV shows. It was just amazing. And of course, we're trying to prepare for this sectional tournament. As a coach, I've never been able to win. Tuesday night is our semifinals, okay? And this is a challenge for me, because I'm Catholic and I'm not going to really talk much about religion. But the hard part is we're playing a Catholic school, and I'm not sure who's going to get to God first. At halftime, we're up by 10. So I'm thinking God's listening to me. But of course, we got to add a more drama to the story. We blow the entire lead. We're actually losing in the fourth quarter. But this team had great resilience. We came back and won. We'd finally broken that barrier. We're going to the Section 5 championship for the first time. Saturday is the Section 5 championship game. We're playing it what we call the Big House, the Blue Cross Arena. Seats about 10,000 people. Normally for a championship game, we get about 4,000. We get to the arena and it's sold out. It's mobbed there. And Channel 8 wants to interview me. So they asked me a few questions and said, Coach, can we interview J-Mac? I said, sure. Now J-Mac's sitting up a couple rows from the floor. I said, Jason, Channel 8 wants to interview you. He gets up, he says, Coach, it's time to get focused. No media interviews. I'm figuring we're ready. That was until our first Section 5 championship game. We're down 13-3 after 3 minutes. I'm like, oh boy, we're in trouble. But as I mentioned, this team had great resilience. We battled back. We actually made a shot with about 8 seconds to go. Our opponent came down, missed a shot. There was a scramble for the rebound, and whack, I got tackled by my JV coach, which indicated we had won our Section 5 championship. We had finally done it. And thank you. And the interesting thing is, after the game, we went to a local restaurant, and we actually saw highlights of our Section 5 championship game on ESPN. You just never know. From there, we went into our state tournament, and unfortunately lost, which ended our run there. But now I'd like to segue. I want to share with you, so you get to know J-Mac a little bit better before I talk about my 6 keys. 2 special stories. The first one, I call it the magic of J-Mac. J-Mac was our manager when we won our first Section 5 championship. Then we have a local minor league basketball team called the Rochester Razor Sharks. They invited Jason to be their manager for the rest of their season. They won their championship. Then that spring, Jason and I were honored at this local Rochester Press Radio dinner, and the featured speaker was Peyton Manning, then of the Colts, now of the Broncos. He invites Jason to their training camp that summer. Yep, they won the Super Bowl the next year. Then that summer, we get invited by Robert Ory, a professional basketball player, played for the San Antonio Spurs. Yup, they won the NBA championship. 2 years after Jason's game, I come in after teaching, and Jason's sitting in the office. And he looks a little bummed. I said, Jason, what's going on? He says, Coach, I really missed the program. Is there any way I can come back? I thought for a moment, and I said, sure. He comes back. We go farther in the state tournament than we ever did. So for a small fee, I will rent him out to you. Our second quick story is we get a chance to meet President Bush. President Bush comes to Rochester, and J-Mac, myself, and his parents are on the greeting tube. He gets off Air Force One. President Bush meets a couple local dignitaries and then comes right up to Jason. He says, J-Mac, I've been waiting all morning to see you. What an honor, what an inspiration you are to our country. I can't believe you scored all those points. And he's going on and on for like 45 straight seconds. Then he stops dead in his tracks. He says, I am so sorry. Is it okay if I call you J-Mac? J-Mac looks at him and says, yeah, is it okay if I call you George W? So after Jason received a swift elbow in the ribs from his mother, it was President Bush and we were all good. But despite that faux pas, President Bush was extremely gracious. It was a wonderful honor to meet him. I'd now like to segue and give you 6 tangible keys that you can take with you to help yourself and others in helping people make their dreams come true. And the first one is passion. And a great question for the students and staff to ask themselves is, what do you love to do? And then the second question is, how do you make it a big part of your life? And I certainly hope as educators that you found your passion, because you have a great opportunity to make such an awesome impact on this world by helping young people. And for the young people listening, is that there's so many people in our world right now that don't like what they do for a living. And I'll give you the illustration for myself. When I was in high school, my passion became basketball. And I wanted to play in the NBA. When I got to college and I got cut from my college team, I realized I don't think I'm going to play in the NBA. But you know what it really taught me? Is there's other ways that you can stay with your passion. And for me, it was coaching basketball and teaching. And I've been fortunate. I'll coach for 34 years, and I still love it today. And the secret there is when you find what you love to do and make it a big part of your life, it doesn't feel like work. That old adage, if you find what you love to do, you don't ever work a day in your life. And there's a lot of truth to that. That when you love what you do because you want to get good in it and you'll invest a lot of time in it, and when you become exceptional in something, you become very attractive to the marketplace. So number 1, find your passion. 2, discover your mission in life. We talked briefly about the Leader in Me program. And I was very blessed. I got a chance to speak to Franklin Covey a couple years ago. And before Dr. Covey passed away, I had a chance to see him speak at a Leader in Me program. But one of the best books I ever read was a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. How many people have ever read that book by Dr. Covey? Great. Seems like a lot of you have. Well, I garnered a lot out of that book. But one of the best things it gave me is Dr. Covey in that book talked about discovering your own personal mission and putting your own personal mission statement down. And at that point in my life, a great question that I started to ask myself, that I ask you to ask, is why were you put on this earth? And when I started to ask that question myself, I started to put notes down. What is my mission? What should I do in life? And now I'm very clear on my mission. My mission is to be an outstanding role model that makes a positive difference in the world by helping others make their dreams come true. And what I found out, when I became clear about my mission, it gave me a guiding light and gave me direction in my life. And there's so many people that don't have direction, and I think it's because they don't understand their mission or purpose in life. So one major takeaway, if you don't have your own personal mission, and for the young people I'm talking about, you may not have thought of this, but find out why you were put on this earth and write it down. Because when you have that guiding light, it helps you make better choices. And when you make better choices, usually good things happen. My third essential key is one that I know everyone here has heard of. But as I travel the country and speak, I found that not many people practice it. And that's to be an effective goal setter. The first thing I want to share with you is when you think it, ink it. What do I mean by that? Write it down. How many here write down their goals? Did you know what the research says? That less than 10% of the people in the United States write down their goals. Yet, people that write down their goals, research tells us, are 10 times more likely to make them come true. Couple tips. One of the things I do every morning is I write down, I have 18 goals right now that I want to accomplish in the next year. Write it down every single day. And what it does is reinforce what's most important to me. You know, some are personal goals, some are professional, some are spiritual, physical. Those are all part that's important to me. The second thing that I do that I really highly recommend you do is put your goals down on index cards. And when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is I start reading those index cards. And Dr. Covey called it being proactive, habit one. Hey, the first thing I share in the mirror is I am responsible. And that's the thing I tell my players every single day. You are the driver of your car. You are responsible. And by writing goals down, you take charge of your life. The other thing I want to share about goals, I got from a personal development coach. I do a lot of reading, I watch a lot of seminars, and listen to a lot of CDs in my car. A guy named Jim Rohn. Has anybody ever heard of Jim Rohn? Jim Rohn passed away, but I have a seminar series of his. And I was watching it many years ago down in my basement. And Jim Rohn had a mentor. And his mentor gave him a lot of good ideas. And how many people mentor someone here? Awesome. How many people have a mentor or more? It's a very powerful thing. I highly recommend that you mentor people and that you have mentors in your life. I've been very blessed to have many mentors in my life. But Jim Rohn's mentor was sharing about goal setting one day. And he said, Jim, now that you're starting to write your goals down, I think you should set a stretch goal. And Jim Rohn says, what's a stretch goal? He goes, well, I'm going to give you an example. I think you should set a goal to become a millionaire. Well, I get so excited about that millionaire goal, I stop the tape, I run upstairs. I said, honey, to my wife, we got a new goal. She goes, what? I go, we're going to become millionaires. She says, how are we going to do that? I says, I don't have any idea, but I go watch the seminar. I go downstairs and I turn the seminar back on, and Jim Rohn hits me right between the eyes with his next statement. He says, it's not the $1 million, but it's the person you become because of the discipline you have to add to your life to make that goal come true. And he is so right. You become a more attractive person when you add more disciplines to your life. In fact, here's a great quote. I give my team quotes all the time. He says, we'll all suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. But discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons. So add those disciplines to your life. My fourth essential key is one that everyone that I know of personally or that I've read about that's had success has this, and that's perseverance. The ability, what I call the never give up mindset. That I'm going to find a way to make it happen, whether I got to go through it, around it, under it, over it, whatever happens, to make it come true. And with that mindset, I'm going to share a couple illustrations. Has anybody ever heard of Jack Canfield or Mark Victor Hansen? If you have not, I know you've probably heard of their book series called Chicken Soup for the Soul. You have heard of that? Hey, I joined the National Speakers Association a few years ago, and I was sitting at a dinner, and Mark Victor Hansen was at my table. And he starts sharing the story about how they tried to get Chicken Soup for the Soul published. They were turned down by over 140 publishers before a small publisher took a chance on them. Do you know that book series has sold over 100 million books? You talk about a stretch goal. Their goal is to sell 1 billion books by the year 2020. Pretty powerful. In my own life, one of my big goals was to become a varsity basketball coach at a young age. And that goal came true. At 25 years old, I became a head coach of a school close to my community, and my dream came true. And I thought I knew what I was doing. I was going to lead this team to great heights. And after 2 games, we were 1-1. I thought, okay, I got it. Then I led that team with my great coaching wizardry to 17 consecutive losses. And then I left that job because I didn't like what the administration had to tell me. Of course, what they told me is you're fired. And it was very humbling. But I talked briefly about mentoring, and I got a big break. I had a local junior college coach. His name was Bill Van Gundy. And you probably have not heard about Bill, but if you follow basketball, you've definitely heard of his sons. Jeff is a commentator on TV and coaching the NBA, and his son Stan is the head coach of the Detroit Pistons. Well, Coach Van Gundy took me under his wing and helped me get back on my feet. And from there, I still struggled. I got back into the high school position, and I struggled, but I kept trying to get better. And finally it clicked. And now for the last 22 years, we haven't had a losing season. We've won 6 out of the last 10 Section 5 championships, and we lost in the state finals this year. Things are good. Things are good. So you don't give up on your dreams. My 5th essential key is what I call carpe diem, which means seize the day. In seize the day, I talk about 3 components. Number 1 is having a positive attitude. And when I use the illustration of my man J-Mac, here was a young man that had never gotten a chance to play. Yet every day he would come to practice with a smile on his face, and his attitude was something special. In fact, one of the quotes I give my team early every season is, "Attitudes are contagious. Is yours worth catching?" Attitudes are contagious. Is yours worth catching? And J-Max was. Second part is I think you have to have an outstanding work ethic. One of the things I always talk to my players about is if you want to be exceptional, you have to be outstanding in things you can control. Can you control your work ethic? Of course. Can you control your attitude? Of course. And the other thing is, I think you have to continue to grow as a person and keep getting better. Keep feeding your mind. How many people read here every day? Hey, awesome. Hey, because that's something you get a chance to feed your mind every day. How many people have a driver's license? Awesome. How many people actually listen to an educational or inspirational CD in their car often? Okay? Something you might want to add if you're not doing that already. Keep growing. And I want to give you one illustration that happened this year. We had a young man on this year's team that was barely playing. He was a senior. And we were 13-0. And going into our 14th game, our point guard drove to the basket, and he got fouled, and he ran into the wall and broke his arm. He was out for the season. And this young man that I just mentioned before, Jake, his name was not playing, but he saw an opportunity. And during the few weeks before this young man that got hurt, you could start to see his attitude had changed, his work ethic. He was starting to catch my eye. After the young man that got hurt, Jake kept working. And I started to give him a little bit of playing time. And he kept going. And his attitude got better. His work ethic got better. He kept growing as a player and as a person. And the interesting thing is, Jake ended up starting the last 3 games of his career. The state quarterfinals, the state semifinals, where he scored 12 points, his career high, in the state finals. Not bad for a guy that had barely played until the postseason of his senior year. So you never know. You got to be ready for that opportunity to seize the day. And my final essential key is to be a great team player. And I want to illustrate that. I want to take you back to that season, 2005, 2006. One of the best things I've ever done as a leader is I got feedback from my players, because I used to not listen to them very much. And I started incorporating captains meetings every week. And the week before senior night in 2006, I asked my captains, hey guys, some years we've started all seniors, some years we haven't. What would you suggest this year? I said, Coach, let's start all 5 seniors. Great. Here's our issue. We have 6 seniors and only 5 starting spots. What are we going to do? Well, it was really neat to see, because the 3 tri-captains then were all debating on which guy wouldn't start. That's when I knew I had something special. We decided that Steve Kerr, one of our players, was not going to start. Well, February 15th, the day of senior night, didn't start out very well. One of our other seniors, his name was Matt, got hurt in a physical education class and now was not going to be able to play that night. Steve, the young man that gave up his starting position, came to me after school. He said, Coach, Matt was the young man that got hurt. He said, I want to boost Matt's spirits. He said, what do you want to do, Steve? He says, I'm going to wear Matt's jersey tonight. I go, wow, that's special. That's what a team's all about. Then with just over 4 minutes to go, J-Mac got his first chance. But I mentioned earlier, and I talk a lot about it in my book, that we had a lot of internal strife. And I never asked those players to pass Jason the ball. Yet in those last 4 minutes, Jason was the only one that shot. Tells you how much they cared about him. In fact, I kid him to this day, Jason, because he works on my staff, I'm still looking for your first assist. And then lastly, after that game, Jason's a national celebrity. And every place we go, people want his picture and autograph. Yet I've done a lot of things with Jason, and they'll often ask him, Jason, what was the best thing about your senior season? And he always says it was winning the Section 5 championship. And that's what makes him such a special guy. Well, to close, I know as an educator, you always got to review, right? Closure's part of his review. All right, so let's review our 6 keys quick, and then I've got 2 closing stories. Key 1 was passion. Find what you love to do, make it a big part of your life. 2, mission. Discover your mission. Write down your own personal mission statement if you don't already. 3, setting goals. Think it, ink it, write it down. Set one of those stretch goals. 4, perseverance. That never give up mindset. 5, carpe diem. Positive attitude, great work ethic, keep growing. And 6, team player. Okay? Well, I'm going to close with 2 stories. First one, let's catch up very quickly on J-Mac. J-Mac in that game was 5'9", 120 pounds. He bench pressed approximately 85 pounds his senior in high school. He now is 6'1", 175 pounds. He bench presses 250 pounds. So his body has changed quite dramatically. But I'm going to illustrate the power of goal setting with him. A few years ago, I come in after teaching a class, and Jason's sitting in my office. I said, Jason, what's going on? He says, Coach, I miss doing something competitive. I've decided to get back into running, because he was a runner in high school as well as basketball. I said, oh yeah, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to run the Rochester Marathon. I said, awesome. I said, because I always talked about goals, what's your goal for the Rochester Marathon? He says, I don't know. I'll come back tomorrow and tell you. And he did. Came back the next day and he says, Coach, here's my goal. I want to qualify for the Boston Marathon. I said, really? What's the qualifying time for the Boston Marathon for your age? He says, 3 hours and 5 minutes. Now, has anybody ever run a marathon? If you have, 3 hours and 5 minutes is pretty fast for your first marathon if you're not familiar. I gulped hard. I said, Jay, you sure? He says, yeah. Coach Shoemaker, our cross-country coach, is giving me a plan, and I'm going to follow it. So he had a nutritional plan. He had a workout plan. And he's a great example of writing your goal down, coming up with a plan of action, and taking action. Well, he runs the first Rochester Marathon. 3 hours, 1 minute, 50 seconds. He qualified for Boston. But you know what he says to me? Coach, I'm not ready to run Boston yet. I'm going to do the Rochester Marathon again before I do Boston. All right? Next year, 3 hours, 50 seconds. He's ready to run Boston. So not this past Boston Marathon, although you just ran that as well. The year before, his new goal, to break 3 hours in the Boston Marathon. He finishes in 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 30 seconds. Power of goal setting. If he can do it, you certainly can do it. And I want to finish with this. As we talk about helping you make your dreams come true, I want to finish with this story. As I mentioned, we had lost 6 times in the Section 5 semifinals. And I'm very close to my parents. Both of them were educators. My dad, in fact, was my high school basketball coach. And after each one of those heartbreaking losses, I would get a call the next day from my mom. And she would always try to give me a pep talk. And she would tell me all this different stuff, but she'd always end the pep talk with this: Jim, God must have a better plan for you. And I must admit, when she told me that for the 6th time, I wasn't so sure Mom was telling me the truth. But as it turned out, Mom was a prophet. Because when we finally won that Section 5 championship, I was mobbed by the media. And one of the first questions they asked me was, Coach, this is your first championship. How does this compare with the JMAC night? I thought for a moment. I said, I'm very excited and happy for my team that we were Section 5 champs. But nothing has ever profoundly touched my heart and soul like the JMAC game. So as we continue to move on, I want to leave you with this one final message. In pursuing your own goals and dreams, remember the best way to help your dreams come true is to help others make their dreams come true. Thanks so much for having me. And God bless you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and welcome again to our 2nd annual Lighthouse Day. I hope everything has been enjoyable thus far. For this segment, we will have the opportunity to hear from a panel of students on how Leadership Initiative has specifically impacted them. But first, I'd like to take a moment to provide some insight on how today's events came together, as well as how the initiative comes together every month. A tremendous group of students, in conjunction with very supportive teachers, work together as a unit to put today and all the other days together. The students before you, as well as many others throughout the building, were chosen as leaders after exhibiting qualities that exemplified habits in school. Every month, our school takes a pause in the action to meet as groups for 30 minutes, to dial in on a new habit and how it applies to life. Our administration and staff recognize great need for students to learn about and incorporate the habits into their lives. For this to happen, the student facilitators and the teachers meet after school to come up with a lesson plan, which you've seen today. This initiative is very student-run, and much of the responsibility falls in the hands of the Lighthouse leaders. John F. Kennedy once said, "Leadership and learning are indispensable to one another."
I believe this quote really wraps up the basis behind the concept of the initiative well. What we learn in leadership can be directly applied to the classroom as well as our everyday lives. From a personal level, being a part of something as impactful as this has made me a better football and lacrosse captain. The habit of seek first to understand, then to be understood, has really been able to allow me to become a better leader for my teams. Instead of just yelling at somebody for running a wrong play or running the offense incorrectly, I sometimes find myself kind of asking them why they did what they did. And at this point, I realize there's usually a reason that's justifiable for what they did. And without this habit of seeking first to understand and then to be understood, I really wouldn't have had that ability to learn what they did. So sure, there are kinks in the initiative and mixed opinions, but all great things take time to perfect. So without further ado, I'd now like to open the floor to my fellow classmates about some questions that are frequently asked about the academies. To start off our discussion, I'd like to introduce Kyle Boyd, a senior Fresh Start mentor. Kyle, what is the leadership program vital to a school society?
Thank you, Tyler. I believe that our school system is almost reliant on this leadership program because not only do the students take on the character of these leaders, but through this leadership program, it's promoting more harmony throughout the school. It's creating a positive culture. And I believe these students really carry a personal relationship with their leaders, even after the program is over.
Thank you, Kyle. Next, we have Aaron Barrett, a senior at the Leadership Academy. Aaron, how can you use leadership in your future?
Every situation in life can have one of the 7 habits apply to it directly, or more than one. So I'm going to Ithaca College next year, so I'll be using the 7 habits to put first things first, whether it be between my schoolwork and sports that I'll be playing. And even after that, and when I get a job, I'll be meeting new people and having to seek first to understand their situations before I judge them. And throughout my whole life, I'll be using the 8th habit, which is new, which is finding your voice. And I'll be finding my voice throughout my whole life, so it'll apply forever.
Thanks, Aaron. Next, we have Haley Shuglowski, a Leadership Academy leader here at East. Haley, how has leadership helped you prepare for college up and coming?
All right, well, I'll be attending Clarkson University in the fall, so it's a very nerdy school. I'm going for environmental engineering. And I think that they have a lot of, being proactive would meaning going to a lot of internships, which they have so many to offer, being mentorship programs and other things, and really synergizing because they do have, it's a small school, which I kind of like, but you can just work together and everyone's so friendly. They have a rule that if you leave your dorm room open, that anyone can just walk in, you can become friends. So I don't know, I just really think that everyone working together and being proactive will really help you in college.
Thank you, Haley. To follow up, we have James Dietz, another leader here at East. James, what habit is most influential to you, or which has had the greatest impact on your life?
Well, as important as the core 7 habits have been for me, especially applying to colleges and just throughout my entire high school career, the most important one that I've learned about through this entire program was the 8th habit, finding your voice. And, well, I'll give you a little background. Last week, I organized the school's acceptance week, which was celebrating diversity and celebrating our differences and what makes us an individual and different human beings and such. And probably the most important thing that I learned in the past 4 years was who I am and who I wanted to be.
Thank you, James. Continuing, we have Elliot, a Fresh Start mentor. Elliot, what do you think the most valuable part of the Fresh Start mentoring program is for the freshmen?
Thank you, Tyler. As a mentor, in my opinion, I think that the FSMP program helps the freshmen become acclimated with the building during their first year, their course load, and their staff members. And it gives them, once a month when we get together for our little period, an opportunity to voice their opinions and discuss and kind of get over any issues they might have with other students or in their classes, kind of behind a closed door.
Thanks, Elliot. Finally, we have Shelby, who is another Fresh Start mentor. Shelby, how do you use leadership in your everyday life?
Okay, so this is going to get a little personal. Back in January, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And if anyone knows what Crohn's disease is or ulcerative colitis, it's not very fun and it's not very pretty. Google it at your will. But because of it, it was a very devastating diagnosis. And anyone who lives with chronic disease or knows someone with chronic disease, it's really changing. I really had that paradigm shift that often we want to kind of happen in our school. We want people to shift their ideas to this leadership program. But for me, I really had no choice, because when it comes to chronic disease, there are 2 points in your life: before your diagnosis and after. And I find, last year I talked about leadership with marching band and my extracurricular activities, but this year I can talk about leadership in my life. I have to use prioritizing, because there's doctor's appointments and there's schoolwork and then there's regular work, so I have to really find that time to make sure everything's going well, and I really have to use sharpen the saw, because if not, I'm gonna get stressed, and that's not fun. So leadership does impact my daily life now, and it's pretty amazing to see that happen.
Thank you, Shelby. Now we will have the opportunity for the audience to ask questions. Your questions can be specific to the member of the panel or general questions that anyone can answer, including the administration here today. If your questions do not get answered due to time constraints, feel free to ask any of the leaders during a down period throughout the lunch. There will be 2 individuals walking around with mics so your questions can be heard. So whoever would like to start with questions for the panel or the administration?
What are some of the biggest challenges for you? I was really impressed with the session we witnessed, and I thought, wow, this is, it's got to be difficult to be asking other kids to be vulnerable in front of each other. Is that part of the challenge? Just what are some of the challenges of being what you do?
Definitely one of the biggest challenges is trying to get people to participate. High school students aren't the best at going with something that they're probably like, oh, this is stupid. But because they don't really understand yet how it's going to really help them out. So definitely the biggest challenge is making them realize that this is something good for them.
For me, I see a lot of negativity when it comes to the leadership program, like, why do we need this, why? And everyone always likes to ask the question, we can't all be leaders in this world, some people do have to follow. And I say that's not the truth. With leadership, sometimes it takes a leader to take a step back and realize you're not the one to lead that project or that thing, that someone else. So sometimes you have to be the leader and take the step back, even though that sounds completely opposite of what leaders are, but it's the truth, and that's probably the most challenging thing I have to get through my freshmen's heads.
I think I'd have to agree with Aaron when it comes to participation, but one cool thing to see was we started this my sophomore year, and to be honest with you, my sophomore year I think we had probably a quarter of the class participating in the activities. My junior year I was also paired up with Aaron, and we probably had half the class participating in activities. And then today during my leadership group, I think there was maybe 3 kids that slightly didn't participate in the activities. So every year there's a buildup of participation as the program gets better and better.
In what ways have you guys built up that participation? Because that seems to be a downfall with one of our leadership groups, is that the participation isn't there. So how have you guys encouraged students to join and work out?
Not gonna lie, candy.
We've even tried that. That's a problem.
It is definitely difficult, but candy, and then really finding, today with the Fresh Start Mentoring, we did puzzles, brain teasers, and they were really participating, and really, that was the most participation I've seen from my freshmen all year. And it may be that, we're at the end of the year and they're more comfortable with the group, but it was cool to have those puzzles, and they were interacting, and they were really thinking hard about, oh, what does this mean, and whatnot. But yeah, candy works, food, and just trying to show them that leadership is in their everyday lives and they can apply it.
The nice thing about leadership is that it's one group. You're staying with the same group since your sophomore year. So the freshmen go into a leadership group, and then you're in that same leadership group with the same people for all 3 years. And then, so you get to know the people, you get to actually, so that kind of helps with participation, not being embarrassed around other people because you're on a good level with them.
And then one other thing I found successful was people like to participate. They don't like to just sit there and listen to you talk about the habit and just be so dry about it. When you involve videos that actually apply to their life, like you've seen the Veterans Day today, people enjoy videos, people enjoy being able to do things like the cards and stuff like that. And then when you find leaders within your group, not just the ones that are leading the classroom, people usually build off of them first and then participate with the leader itself.
The students, are they the ones that facilitate the summer training? And what does the summer training look like and how long is it?
All right, well, Miss Ocasio kind of like runs it, and well, most of the time, and then we split up into groups, and we each create like a lesson for the month, for the like upcoming like 4 or 5 months. And but like the first day we like go over the habits to make sure we're refreshed with them and we know exactly what they mean. And I think it was like 3 times we came in, and it was like a couple hours each time.
So we facilitate. I have Mrs. Kruger with me as well on the leadership side, and then Mrs. Welgus and Mrs. Shaw on the FSMP side. So maybe one of the FSMP, if you want to just respond in a moment. We facilitate it, and what I mean by facilitate, we have an agenda of what they have to get through for the day, and then, like Aaron explained, they break into groups. They do the work. So yes, they run it, because during that point in time, what they're doing is they're creating lessons for the year. So when we come back, and we have different ways that we refresh them on, on the 8 habits, but what they really, their goal for that day is, what do you want to do this year? What's our theme going to be? What's leadership teams going to look like? And they have the power to make those decisions. And they've changed it every year. One year, not this year, last year we had every leadership team did a service project. This year we've done mini service projects, because the year-long service projects, the kids felt it was a little difficult with some of the groups. So it's changed. We learn as we grow. This program is not, it's not that old in our school. It's only 3 years old. And so we are still learning, because as we tell the kids, Mrs. Kruger and myself tell the kids every time we meet, we're 45. We have no clue what's cool anymore. So only they know what's cool. So FSMP, you want to answer?
Sorry. From the Fresh Start mentoring side of our leadership program, for the summer training, as you had asked, it's facilitated by Mrs. Shaw and Mrs. Welgus, but we split off into groups, just into the pairs of the two mentors for the freshman group, a senior and a junior, and you get to meet your partner, and then we come back together. We kind of review the now 8 habits, and then we review who we're going to have in our group next year, and then we do some kind of teamwork, team building activities, and we build signs for our tours for the orientation. Thank you. But we only meet once for FSMP to kind of jumpstart the beginning of the year in fall.
And just to touch on that, when it comes to the lessons, Ms. Shaw and Ms. Welgus are the ones who plan them. They're more in tune with the 7 habits and how to talk to freshmen. Both of them are mainly freshman teachers, so they do see these kids a lot, and so they do plan the lessons that we do. But they do take input from us as well. If we say this wasn't working or this works really well, they really try to fit it and make notes for next year.
I knew there was one over here somewhere.
So today is obviously a big day because you had the freshman lessons and everything, but how does this impact your daily life as a sophomore, junior, or senior? What are they getting out of the experience on a daily basis, or how is the school making it a priority on a daily basis for you?
On a daily basis, I think a lot of students come into the school like a general background of you got to be a good worker, you got to prioritize, but the habits really define what it means to be a true character at the school. And then throughout classrooms, you'll hear teachers say, like, seek first to understand, then be understood, when a student's jumping to conclusions about a problem or something like that. Or you'll hear them say, put first things first when you have a big project ahead of you. that you can't wait to the last minute to do your project because then you get really overloaded. So I think in general, as you progress through the program, the habits really define certain parts of your life and they really help you stay on track to be successful.
And I'm just gonna, Mr. Winnicky, who is one of our assistant principals, really always says that when kids, are in his office, what the habits have done for us as a school is it's given us a common language. So what he can do is he can talk to the kids in the language of him and Mrs. Sweeney, our other assistant principal. They can talk to the kids using that language, and they understand what it means, as Tyler just described. So it runs throughout, so it's from discipline to classroom to the field, as Tyler mentioned in the beginning, to music, as Shelby said. So that's really where I think the common theme, the thread to every day, and it wasn't that way when we started. So this has been 3 years. So now we know what that means. And somebody used paradigm shift and made me very proud today. DJ, I think you had some over there.
Also, I will say that there have been ways that we've implemented it. Teachers are awesome. They just find ways to implement it, whether it's our student of the month, staff of the month, our leader of the month, and how they recognized or identified. Or we'll have like quarterly recognitions for our students, and we'll link those to leadership habits. We just did, leader of the week, and like Friday, a couple of our teachers I began to identify students based on teacher nominations, and would just read a couple nice words about a student. Wouldn't even, and about what some teachers or staff members said about the student. So you find ways, your staff will find ways to creatively interweave the language and the themes behind what it means to be a good person and work hard. I mean, much is common sense, but I think that the 7 habits allow us to frame it in such a way that's consistent and that can tie into a lot of different things. Even our homecoming, our kind of Olympiad games are tied around the 7 habits and leadership. So those are just some ways that you keep, putting it in the different places of the school besides just the once a month or reading this teen book in 9th grade, etc. Just want to add on that.
I was wondering, as students, what do you see the adults in your system, your teachers and administrators, doing that models their understanding of these habits?
For me, I think I see it a lot when it comes to Miss Welga. She is a teacher for me, and she does run our Fresh Start mentoring. But she also teaches seniors. She teaches AP Government, which is like my favorite class. And she does like to talk about the habits. She keeps stuff around the room talking about the habits. I believe at the beginning of the year, teachers were given goal sheets of what they wanted to accomplish each quarter. And that kind of set in mind what leadership can do for these teachers as well, because they're also learning from this program as we are. And so yeah, Ms. Belgis is probably the best example I have. She likes to say, prioritize. You guys have to study for that AP Gov exam that's next in 2 weeks, but you also have to do this economics project. So it's fun to see them try and implement it.
Another way I see it implemented would be in my math classroom. My teacher, Ms. Eisman, I don't know if you catched her today or caught her today. I'm better at math than English. But she does a flipped classroom, so we actually take our notes off of videos outside of the classroom, and then we apply it to classwork inside the classrooms. And you sit next to a partner, and you just work through problems off your notes throughout the classroom. And it really forces you to be a leader to your classmates, because sometimes I'll understand derivatives and Aaron understands integrals. So I'll be the leader for derivatives, and Aaron's the leader for integrals. So maybe it's not a specific habit that it enforces, but it really enforces being a keen leader in the classroom.
To sort of piggyback off of that question, what professional development then do the administrators and teachers get on leadership and leadership training and development? And a second part to that, if I may, is have you seen a shift in the culture of the school since implementing this, specifically, with discipline, issues of bullying, and things of that nature?
I'll bring the microphone to the administrators.
You guys might be able to touch on the culture piece, though. I don't know if you... Senior could start. I'll talk to you a little bit about professional development. So it can be a challenge sometimes, specifically at the secondary level, but we try to find ways to kind of give booster shots to our staff. So it started with the signature training through Franklin Covey. We were fortunate to have some people in our district that were trained, but we also brought in Franklin Covey representatives to teach and to work with our teachers. And all of our staff members, actually. So I was able to carve out some opening day conference days that was that we would have planning and prep to start the year. And also use some after school hours, times like additional hours that I would have to work with the teachers. I would dedicate that to some of the signature training, just learning the habits. So that's kind of how you get started, and you kind of form that foundation and that understanding of the habits for the teachers to kind of invest in themselves or your staff to learn the habits. But moving forward over the last several years, we have needed booster shots. So there are times where I will run run something where we'll do an after-school activity. There are times where we've had local Franklin Covey representatives, Gary Magui, I don't know if any of you locally have had any interaction with him, has come and done some trainings. And also really just turn to my Lighthouse team. So you kind of establish a group of teacher and staff leaders that embrace the habits and that want to serve as kind of an advisory board Lighthouse team. We recently did, between our winter recess and our spring recess, a 7-week challenge. So each week, two of us took the week, so I opened up with, let's say, with week 1 and picked begin with the end in mind, and I would put together a little email, maybe share a video clip, or just challenge teachers as something to think about, and then give them a duty or a task. Like, if you accept the challenge, take this, write down 3 goals, 2 things that you've accomplished personally and professionally, and 2 things that you want that are a goal of yours, and hang it on your wall if you accept the challenge. Next would have been, everyone got a picture of tulips with another staff member's name on it. Fill out the tulips and write 5 things, characteristics that are, make a deposit in someone else's emotional bank account. So you work with your team to continue to infuse and kind of, because these are stressful, this is stressful, our jobs. And there's a lot going on. So to just try to bring them back to what's important in their life. It's healthy for the staff and for the teachers. And you're right that, they have to be role models. So we kind of keep going back to that. Nadine's got something to say, I think. No. She's a key factor in us working together. But it's an excellent question, I'll tell you, and it can be a challenge because you want to keep lifting up and keep refocusing it. But our teachers have been great at trying to find creative ways to do that. We did a kickball game after school, sharpen the saw, and all the staff, and we had departments with one another, and it was fun. People really enjoyed it. It was just a way to kind of let loose a little bit, was just one example, too.
All right, so I'll touch on the culture shift. So there's definitely a big difference in unity between all the grades. Like, there's always that kind of split between upperclassmen and underclassmen, especially during pep rallies. And leadership has created this type of unity throughout the school. There's the FSMP, they get to know their freshmen, and the freshmen feel comfortable with the older students and can come to them with their problems. And I even know my one friend Lauren, she has her freshmen texting her about problems that they have. So it definitely has created unity. And I know it has brought out leaders in the school. James created the acceptance week all by himself, and he did it as a way to get himself out there. So that was amazing.
And I do want to just add, as much we get a tremendous amount of support from our superintendent and our Board of Education, but we have to find ways, just in the way that education is today all over the United States, financially, we can't have a lot of money towards this program. So we've had to do fundraising. We've had to look to the kids to help us find ways that don't involve money to be able to make those culture shifts. So, as Mr. Cervoni was saying, he does some of the training. We try to find various ways that are cost effective in order to be able to train our teachers. And we're just like kids, right? We need a booster shot too. Every once in a while, we needed to be reminded of those habits. So we're certainly not perfect. And, that's what we tell the kids. Nobody is perfect. So we all need these booster shots and to be reminded of these simple habits that could help, change our school, change our culture, and change our lives.
And just to speak to the, what effect does it have, culture with respect to discipline in the high school, over the course of now the 3 years of doing this, after year one, with the common language and having those conversations with kids, you could really start to see some of the issues that just seem to always be present in high school get lessened. There wasn't as much talking back to teachers and skipping out of class, because the conversation could always be, your end is a high school diploma for this phase of your life. So are we getting there, or are we kind of taking a step back? The old football coach I had used to say, you either get better or you get worse every day. So we kind of can frame it in the habits language. Kids are oftentimes, when they are acting out, as we all know, it's not really personal. It's not about us who's in the classroom, but they want our attention for some reason. And so as a group, we started to implement, more positive ways that we can give kids attention. We have a program here called Caught in the Habit. And if a staff member sees either a student or a colleague doing something proactive or putting first things first, we just fill out a little form, put their name on it, and write down what they did. We deposit it in a box. And about every quarter or so, those are collected, and the student might get a cookie from Tim Hortons or the faculty member with that attached to it. So they know, oh my gosh, Mrs. Ocasio saw that. Somebody saw me doing something positive for somebody else. And with a decline in discipline issues, gives you more time to focus on the positive, which really kind of lends itself to just that positive culture shift, where I would say a majority of my day is no longer spent dealing with things that you don't, the bad part of the job, the stressful part, but more positive. How do we get better today is really more, you can spend more time focused on leading and developing student leaders versus, putting out those fires that we all get caught up in too much. So it's been great. It takes time, it takes patience, but it's worth it.
Other questions? We can take a few more questions before we move to lunch. Oh, there we go.
How is embracing the 7 habits? Have you seen any improvements in student achievement and also well-being of students' social and emotional? I think I'm old enough to add in teachers, students as well, what we've seen.
Student achievement?
Oh, well, okay. So I'm so absorbed, I think, in the program with my role in it that sometimes, I overlook, all the progress that we've made, because I always think kids are great. So but as Mr. Winnicki was just saying, we have our participation in government program. We require the students, we have a very rigorous program that requires the students to do a project, and they pick a topic, a community topic. I always say, what bugs you? What do you want to fix? And they look at the community problem and they do research on the problem, and then after they do their research paper, then we tell them, what are you going to do to fix it? And they write a project proposal. So prior to leadership, prior to the 7 habits coming in, what do you want to fix? And so we would see, smaller projects that perhaps kids didn't have, they did something easy. And now as the program, the leadership program has grown, I begin to see kids who are putting themselves out there, who are putting on a fashion show to raise money for abuse victims. I watch kids put on a concert for cancer with all kinds of donations, and they had music groups at a fire hall, and they raised over $2,500 for Roswell Park. And I see kids doing really amazing things. And so, yes, do I see a difference in achievement? I do. And to me, that achievement is they're willing to put themselves out there more, because I think they're believing that they can do it, that they can, if they begin with the end in mind, they can figure out what their end is, what do they want this project to look like, then they can put first things first. And they synergize like crazy. I mean, kids who aren't in PIG this semester are still helping kids who are in PIG this semester. And they have really, last semester, there were kids who made bracelets, and they raised an incredible amount of money, again, for Roswell Park. So that's where I see student achievement. I see kids who are beginning to gain confidence, who are believing in themselves, and then who are coming back and looking at me and saying, you know what, this was great because in college I had to do something similar and I already knew the steps to be able to do it. And so if they put themselves out there, then they're achieving greater things even in their higher education. Do you want to talk about discipline? You sort of touched on discipline. What was the other thing? I'm sorry. Academics. We talked about.
I can touch on the social emotional a little more personally. Having the 7 habits as that tool, once again, kids saying, why do we need this? Why do we need to learn this? Blah, blah, blah. It goes back to, this is a tool that you can use at any point in your life. You are going to go into the workforce, and we know that Covey is implemented in many different places in the business world. And so when you go out there into the world, you are going to have that tool. But going back to it being a tool for me, it was something that gave me a little calm. I could look back at my planner, which actually has the habits listed in there. It's our planner where we keep track of our homework and whatnot. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, I know this, I have it with me, how can I use it? How can I make my life a little bit easier for myself right now? And it does work, so it's helped calm me a little bit. And I don't know about anyone else, but it works for me.
I know for at least me and Haley, it has definitely made us more confident as speakers. Like, this is kind of like difficult to like meet new people, like shaking everybody's hands in the morning, like welcome. Like, it has definitely made me a more outgoing, outspoken person and be able to voice my opinions and just kind of put myself out there.
And if I'm not sure, I think there were some of you maybe a couple years ago who were at Buff State at the symposium, so I'll talk about a former student to give the example. And at Buff State, at the symposium that was there, he did explain that the habits here and the acceptance that he felt from the habits helped him to come out to his peers and actually socially and emotionally accept who he was, to be who he was, and to feel like that the school culture would embrace him for who he was. So I think that socially and emotionally, it's giving kids a place to turn and to feel that they are accepted, because we sort of look at synergizing, we look at sharpening the saw, we go through every single one of those habits in some way, shape, or form throughout the months. So it gives kids look at it as a comfortable place because of all the things that these kids have talked about. We put them in these small groups. They have a place to call home. We have administrators who use a common language with them and come down to a level with them that they can understand. And so we have teachers who are doing the same thing. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know if you have a little... I'm coming. I put my comfy shoes on now.
I'm just curious, how do you guys take this home? You take it to sports, you take it in school, but how do you take it home and involve your families?
Well, personally, my mother is a businesswoman, and she actually does 7 effective habits of business people or something along those lines. And it's kind of cool to be able to work with her and understand what she's going through as an employer, as well as myself in the classroom, and then you kind of see the habits come out within each other. And right now we're looking for an apartment, and you can see like how we have to prioritize. You got to be able to plan out selling one, getting the apartment at the other. You got to be able to synergize. Her and I work totally different schedules. She works 9 to 5 and is always traveling, and then I'm home in between sports, whatnot. So we really have to work as a team and synergize to be able to put everything together as one. So it's just all the habits come together in everyday life.
For me, my dad, he owns 2 small businesses. Well, not really small. They're I don't know. I don't know much about the business aspect, but he does come to me and he asks me, you're going through this leadership thing. How can I be a better boss? How can I encourage worker morale? So I am talking with my dad, once again, in the business sense, but then going to my mom who does everything for me, who is just the most amazing person in my life, next to my dad. And they're on the same level. I shouldn't. But, teaching her to maybe, take a step back and take some time for herself because she's jumping and trying to help me with everything that I can, and my younger sister as well. So it's, just letting your parents know that, hey, these things, they don't just apply to business, they do apply to your home life. So,
I have a pretty big family. I have 2 sisters, a brother, and 2 cousins that usually live with us like over the summer. So everybody's gone now in college, but when they come back during the summer, all girls, and we have to share a bathroom. So I can definitely tell you, it's we get into a lot of fights. So think win-win is definitely, and like making sure that we all are on like different schedules, showering, like it's definitely applied to the home life.
Okay, so at this point, our time frame for this section has come to a close. I now invite you to go to the gymnasium for lunch, but I just want to say that if you have any further questions, we're here all day. Just feel free to ask us. Thank you.